في الحلقة الماضية فتحنا ملفات العقود والشركات وسألنا الصحفي الأمريكي كين سيلفرستين شلون بلد صرف أكثر من 80 مليار دولار على الكهرباء بس بعده يعيش بالظلام. تبعنا الأسماء والصفقات والمشاريع وشفنا شلون تتحول العقود إلى متاهة. كل طريق بيها يرجعك إلى نفس السؤال: هل الفشل صدفة؟ لو منظومة مصممة حتى تخلي الفشل مربح والحساب ممنوع؟ اليوم راح نكمل من حيث ما وقفنا، ولكن من زاوية أعمق، من زاوية النظام اللي يصنع الفساد ويخليه جزء من أسلوب الحكم، مو خطأ عرضي. ضيفتنا اليوم امرأة تعرف هذا النظام مو من الكتب بل من الميدان. سارة تشايز، ضابطة سابقة ومستشارة في وزارة الدفاع الأمريكي البنتاغون. سوري آسف. يلا نعيد. 1. تمام. ضيفتنا لهذا اليوم امرأة تعرف هذا النظام مو من الكتب بل من الميدان. سارة تشايز، ضابطة سابقة ومستشارة في وزارة الدفاع الأمريكية البنتاغون. اشتغلت أكثر من 10 سنوات في أفغانستان وسنة في العراق. كانت بيها شاهدة على شلون تتحول المساعدات إلى صفقات، وشلون يلبس الفساد بدلة الإصلاح في النهار ويتحول إلى شبكة مصالح في الليل. هي صاحبة الكتاب المعروف لصوص الدولة لماذا يهدد الفساد الأمن العالمي، واللي ترجع به فكرة الفساد من انحراف إداري إلى نظام حكم كامل، نظام ما يتقوض بالعقوبات بل بالفهم والوعي والمحاسبة. اليوم ما راح نحكي عن شركة أو عقد، راح نحكي عن العقل اللي يصمم العقود، عن المنظومة اللي تخلي الفشل يتكرر واللي تسلب المواطن حقه وتخليه يصدق أنه هذا مجرد قدر. من بغداد إلى كابول ومن واشنطن إلى العواصم اللي تشبهنا، راح نقدر نكسر حلقة العجز قبل ما تعيدنا نقطة البداية. After all that context, it's time to hear from someone who's not just studied corruption, like she's lived through it, fought it, and exposed it. Sarah, welcome to Cross Lines. It's a real pleasure to have you on.
The pleasure is entirely mine, Beyrak.
I appreciate it. Sarah, in your book, Thieves of State, you argued that corruption isn't a mistake. It's a system of rule. From North Africa after the Arab Spring to Uzbekistan, Nigeria, Nepal, Honduras, and Iraq's energy sector. Does what we see look like chaos or controlled by design?
I think your word system is the most important one to bear in mind. It's a system, and it's a system that is run by networks. So very often, it's not the formal institutions of state that really matter. It's the networks that are woven behind, beneath, around them. And these networks are both sophisticated and successful. Successful at what they're trying to do, which is not necessarily govern. What they're trying to do is maximize revenues for their members.
So when you say like system of rule, like do you mean corruption becomes part of the governing software, not a malfunction, but the code itself?
Exactly. Not just part of the governing software. It really is. It is the governing software. Basically, governing becomes almost a front activity. You see what I mean? It's like almost a camouflage for what's actually going on, except that governing is also the best way possible to maximize revenues, right? Because you have so many instruments of power and of accumulation within government structures.
Well, can a country like trapped in that system ever rebuild trust without, first exposing who profits from the breakdown?
I mean, I don't see, frankly, how a systemically corrupt country reforms piecemeal. I think actually once a country is in the total grip of kleptocracy, you're looking at a situation where you almost need a paradigm shift. And that means those who are trying to battle corruption, in a way, I think they have to wait for a window of opportunity, which is a massive window, and they have to judge when a window of opportunity opens. That means beforehand, they have to take a very careful inventory of, first of all, the structure and personnel of the corrupt networks, the potential allies and even unlikely allies. And also, what are the choke points in the revenue streams so that those places are areas for, immediate reform?
Of course.
I think they also have to beware of one corrupt network being replaced by another. So think ahead to what is the other network's likely, revenue streams going to be, and get some very serious regulation around those. And then I would say, very importantly, when a window of opportunity opens, work night and day. You only have 6 months or 9 months.
Yeah, that's.
And I would say the fall of Saddam Hussein represented potentially that window of opportunity for Iraq.
Yeah, but we didn't use it,
terribly mishandled.
Yeah, it's terribly mishandled, as you said. Well, of corporations as a system, someone wrote the rules. Were they drafted in local ministries or in foreign, boardrooms and embassies, sorry?
So another excellent question, and I'm going to be
that.
difficult and say it's both.
It's
both. And what's really important to understand is the degree to which these kleptocratic networks are transnational. So if you take the GE story, which is, kind of the kickoff point for this whole conversation, GE was imposed on Iraq. It was imposed from Washington. There was no one in Iraq initially who, as far as I know, was interested in giving GE a monopoly over, quote unquote, rebuilding the energy system in Iraq.
For over 20 years, not just that,
Yeah, exactly. And you know better than I, who is on the board of directors now of GE's Iraq subsidiary?
Yeah, the former one was like Khaled. I said, yeah, now I don't want to mention names, actually. You know that.
You don't need to mention names, but are they Americans or are they Iraqis?
No. They're Iraqis, but being oversight by the U.S. government. You know that.
Supposedly.
Yeah,
but there you go. Do you see what I mean? There you go. They're both writing the rules. And they're both writing the rules in a way that will benefit their revenue streams for both of them. In other words, they are members of a unified transnational network. And although, they may have internal rivalries, or somebody wants to get promoted, or someone wants that job, or whatever.
Of course.
Overall, they are colluding on the rules of the game.
Well, the meaning, the architecture of corruption is often, imported as much as it's homegrown. Well,
it's both. And each side is learning from the other.
I can tell. Well, when a company fails technically but profits politically, that's not a contract. That's a racket, as you know. So at what point does failure itself become the product, in your opinion, Sarah?
I think so. This is what I'm saying. That what you're talking about are called white elephants, and they're actually designed to fail. They're designed to fail in their stated objectives. But you know what, Beirak? They succeeded. They succeeded because the real objective is generating those profits that you mentioned.
And they
That's
did,
the purpose. And no one is holding them accountable for,
for decades.
Exactly, for the actual on the ground outcome.
Well, so what I can tell is the incentive is not to fix the system, but to keep it broken, just enough to stay lucrative.
Exactly. Because in fact, particularly in a development reconstruction kind of situation, if you fix it, that's the end of your contracts, right?
It is. And that's the point, actually. So you've worked in places where telling the truth can cost lives, as I mentioned earlier, So from Afghanistan to Honduras, How do we protect insiders like the engineers and auditors before the system silences them? That's the real question here, Sarah.
I think it is a question, but I want to take you a little deeper.
I would love to.
Good protections are great, but at best, they keep the whistleblowers, the brave people, alive. What about the effect? What's the point of them even speaking up? The effect will depend on the context, right?
Right.
In a healthy context, there are going to be repercussions when somebody blows the whistle. And I think there's a very good Iraqi case about that. I can't remember, was it Khalid Asadi?
Yeah, Khalid al-Asadi, like
really,
when he was like a whistleblower, you know?
Sorry?
It was like Khalid al-Asadi story, you know? Like when he actually like went to the court, the American court to...
Exactly, exactly. Now, the point is that there was a healthy system that he could turn to. So he went in, it was 2010, I think, around there.
Yeah, 2010.
He went back, that was when there was a very strong legislation in the United States against bribing bribing foreign officials. So he was able to take his observations to a healthy system, and there were repercussions for GE. It had to settle for a significant amount of money. But that would not have been the case inside Iraq at that point, would it?
No, it's not.
No. Yeah. So then if you don't have a healthy, for example, and you're not going to have a healthy system within a systemically corrupt country, the best I think you can hope for is very serious public outcry.
Yeah, but the thing
is, force the regime, you know, the kleptocratic network into some kind of change.
The thing is, Sarah, like the governments kept shifting day after day, you know? And we can't control that. And you know that. No.
And that's the problem. And that's why, again, yes, it's important to protect whistleblowers, but it's unfortunately most important to do that where there is the risk of repercussions. Do you see what I mean? If there's no risk for repercussions, there's no point in the whistleblower taking that risk. Again, the public outcry is valuable. Maybe it's more important for a whistleblower to sit down with other like-minded people and think out some of the questions that you asked me about what are the types of reforms that ought to be enacted in the future when a window of opportunity presents itself to prevent similar malfeasance.
Well, like, is a protection possible without political will, or does it always depend on change at the very top, as you mentioned earlier?
I have to say, in my experience, I think when a system is as entrenched as it is in Iraq, you really need fundamental change at the top. And as I say, that means preparing very carefully for a window of opportunity. Who needs to be held accountable straight away in order to sort of dismantle the network? How do you foresee and protect against the rise of alternative networks? What are the key reforms in which sectors that need to be enacted straight away, and get ready to drink a lot of coffee and tea to keep you awake about 20 hours a day. And, you know, I would say that my experience of this grows out of the Arab Spring countries in North Africa. And I spent especially quite a lot of time in Tunisia, a little bit less in Egypt. In Tunisia, I remember after the fall of Ben Ali, there was a change in the cabinet ministries, and there was a ministry of anti-corruption and government reform.
I can tell.
They appointed a very kind gentleman who was a surgeon. And I said, forget it. This isn't going anywhere. You know, you have to have somebody very, very solid in an immediate post-kleptocratic network government who is really going to take them on. I used in my book about corruption in the United States, called On Corruption in America and What is at Stake, I used a mythological being as a metaphor, and that being is the Hydra, who is a creature from Greek mythology, a many-headed serpent. And the problem is when you cut off one head, two more grew.
Two more grow, yeah. I've read about it.
And so that is a very good metaphor for these networks. And if you're going to take them on, you have to be a superhero. And you have to take them on in a variety of different ways at the same time.
Okay. Well, if Baghdad or any country caught in this loop, ask you for 1 year plan to break it, not dreams, but rules, to rewrite was the first law and you changed, and the one compromise like you'd never allow. What it will be, Sarah?
I mean, as I say, it's very hard to say that in the abstract. You would have to do a careful analysis of the specific context. But some considerations I think are really critical are, one to do with nepotism, that family members, best friends, in-laws do not get to be in the same government together. I think another very important one is what we call conflict of interest or revolving door. You don't get to go straight from a ministry into the industry, not just a company, but the industry that you were regulating, and vice versa. I think those are two very, very important ones. Obviously, independent oversight, so independent agencies that are not, whose terms, for example, are not appointed. They're not appointed by each incoming chief of state. Their terms straddle the end of office periods, and also their budgets are independent and permanent, so that they are not subject to the whims. I think you need thoroughgoing police reform that takes these issues into consideration. And then, in my view, you do something like, when a police unit has been through the reform process, they get a new uniform. And then you were just talking about whistleblowers, you open a portal where ordinary people can report on police officers who have been through the training who are nevertheless committing corruption. I'm using police as an example. You can use other,
terms.
And then, those officers are investigated. And they get an increase in pay also when they have been through the reform. And then if they are found guilty, they are dismissed. Similarly, I think there's a very important type of training that I hadn't thought of, but it was a Nigerian prosecutor who brought this to my attention. Very often, a person who holds office is not actually confronted with a choice between right and wrong. He's confronted, or she is confronted, with a choice between two different values, two different rights. These are not the really totally corrupt people. I'm talking like a new judge, for example, a young person who might be idealistic. Well, let's say they get a call from their imam, very respected person in their community. And this imam says, look, you have a young person, or you have a person coming, let's say an elderly person coming before you next week. I can vouch for that person. You must find them innocent, or you must, be lenient with them.
I see where we're going.
What does that young judge do? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a deep cultural pressure to obey the imam. On the other hand, their office says, I have to treat this case neutrally. I believe that training could be very helpful for people who might be confronted with those situations, so they don't have to think on the fly. You see what I mean? So they practice responses with real role playing and everything like that. So they can practice, so when it happens, they have the words that come easily to mind. Those are some of the some ideas. Let me just finish by saying, focus regulatory activities on the major revenue streams. That means in every single country I've looked at, energy, high-end real estate, banking, and the finance sector. And then for Iraq, you would look at what are some of the other lucrative areas. They'll be different in every country. That's where regulation should be the highest.
Well, it
And
is.
in cases of development or humanitarian assistance, ensure that citizen oversight is incorporated.
Indeed. Well, after everything you've witnessed, like from Kabul to Lagos, from Tunis to Tiguchi Galba, I think I mispronounced it, like it's Tigochi
Yeah, it's a
Galba.
terrible
Yeah,
name.
it's a terrible name. Is
Tegucigalpa.
cooperation today a failure of policy or a deliberately strategy of power?
No question in my mind that it's a deliberate strategy. I think we are currently living in the period that is most dominated by transnational kleptocratic networks capturing governments both in the West, the developed world, and in countries like Iraq, all the way through Africa, Latin America. It's not every single country, but it is the dominating structure of government. The worst it's been since, I would say, the period between 1870 and about 1935. And let me just finish with a word of caution. When I was studying that period, my question, of course, came, what got the world out of it back then? The terrifying answer that I couldn't avoid was mass catastrophe, meaning
It is a
2
mass
world
catastrophe.
wars, 2 genocides, use of the nuclear bomb, a massive economic meltdown, and a global pandemic, not that different from COVID. I have to confess that I don't see us avoiding that trajectory. It feels to me that we're on the exact same trajectory. So what I'd like to leave you with is the urgency of this work. This is, in my view, the most important thing anybody could be involved in, not to mention, which we haven't yet, its impact on the gorgeous, generous, ever-patient earth that we have been gifted, and that it is our privilege to inhabit. We are destroying it. And it's largely because of the practices that we've been discussing today. And if we don't address these things, I honestly believe that the future of our species depends on addressing these things.
Yeah, unfortunately. So when corruption becomes strategy, is reform still possible, like from within, or does it always come from collapse?
I mean, I think we've touched on that. I really think it doesn't necessarily have to be collapse, but quite interestingly, if you look back at the ancient mythologies of most, in fact, communities around the world, they almost always include some kind of trickster god, or they include a deity who is both the creator and the destroyer. And I actually think that within those belief systems lies a great wisdom, which is that sometimes destruction is required for creation, sometimes death is required for rebirth. And when we look around us at the natural world, that's always the case, you know?
It is.
And the question is, can we meet the decay or collapse of the current civilizational, political, economic model with some kind of equanimity? And can we notice the opportunity that will open for radical reimagination?
Well, you lived inside governments and alongside citizens. From Afghanistan to Nigeria to Nepal, what's the single lesson every reformer should understand before they even begin?
The empire will strike back. Don't think that just because you've toppled a government that you've won. The work starts once the kleptocrats are down on the ground. That's when your work starts. Don't go home.
Oh, well, Sarah, thank you for being with us here tonight and for sharing a lifetime of experience turned into knowledge. Your work, has challenged how the world understands corruption, and as an accident, but not as an accident, as you say, but as a system of power. It's been a privilege for me having you on Crossline. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
I thank you, Beyrak. Wonderful questions.
اللي سمعناه الليلة مو بس تحليل سياسي ولا نقاش أكاديمي، اللي سمعناه تحليل بنيوي لنظام يعيش بيننا كل يوم، من أصغر معاملة لأكبر عقد. الفساد مو غيمة تمر وتخلص، هو مناخ كامل، إذا ما غيرنا راح يغيرنا أكثر. من تجارب سارة تشايز نعرف أن الفساد ما ينهزم بالنيات ولا يختفي بالتصريحات، ينهزم يوم تصير إرادة الناس أقوى من الطمع. يمكن الكهرباء ترجع والمشاريع تشتغل، بس إذا ما تغير النظام اللي يصنع الفشل راح نرجع كل سنة لنفس السؤال: وين راحت الفلوس؟ ليش الظلمة بعدها؟ كروس لاينز ما وجد حتى يلوم ولا حتى يبرر، كروس لاينز وجد حتى يسمي الأشياء بأسمائها ويمنح الحقيقة شجاعة السير عكس الريح حين يصمت الجميع. اليوم ما أغلقنا ملف، بس بدينا عدا عكسيا لإصلاح البلد. الأمل موجود إذا تحول لعمل وأسرار. تغيير المسار ما يصير بيوم وليلة، بس يبدي بخطوة واعية وثبات طويل. شكرا لأنكم تختارون تشوفون الحقيقة مثل ما هي. أنا بيرق فيصل غازي، نلتقي في حلقة قادمة من كروس لاينز.